In 1513, an Ottoman admiral drew a world map that creates a problem historians still can't fully verify. Not because it shows impossible knowledge, but because the map openly admits it's a compilation, built from other charts, including a map attributed to Christopher Columbus. And most of those source maps are missing today. So the mystery isn't what the map shows, it's what the map depends on, and what didn't survive. Before we go any further, it's important to be clear about what kind of mystery this is. This is not a story about secret technology, it's not a story about ancient super civilizations, and it's not a story where one shocking discovery changes everything. This is a different kind of mystery. It's about missing evidence, about a historical object that openly admits it depends on other objects that no longer exist, and that puts historians in an unusual position. Because instead of asking, what does this map prove? They have to ask, what would need to be true for this map to exist at all? That's the question guiding this investigation. Not what we want the map to mean, but what the surviving evidence allows us to say. What you're looking at is the Piri Reis map, dated 1513, drawn by Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, known as Piri Reis, an Ottoman naval admiral and experienced sailor. According to UNESCO's Memory of the World documentation, the surviving piece exists only as a fragment and large sections of the original are missing, limits that matter when people make big claims about what the map proves. What remains shows Western Europe, North Africa, the Atlantic, and most famously, parts of the Americas. UNESCO also notes the fragment is preserved in the Topkapı Palace Museum Library in Istanbul. And for centuries, no one outside the archives knew it existed. A map can only be as credible as the evidence behind it. And here, the evidence is missing. UNESCO's account places the rediscovery in 1929 during cataloging work in the Topkapı Palace collections. The story is commonly tied to the scholar Gustav Adolf Deismann, followed by early publication and study in the early 1930s. Once researchers realized what it was, the reaction wasn't ancient aliens. It was more practical and more unsettling. If this map is a patchwork of sources, which parts come from reliable charts and which parts are inherited errors? Before judging accuracy, you have to understand the map's type. The Piri Reis map uses features associated with Portolan charts, navigation maps built around rhumb lines radiating from compass roses. As the Library of Congress explains in its materials on Portolan charts, these maps can be excellent for coastal navigation, but they weren't designed to represent the entire globe with consistent scale. So distortions, especially when you stretch regional coastal data across oceans, are not shocking. But here's the part that matters for this investigation. Imagine trying to tape together 20 different photographs, each taken from a different angle, using different lenses and measured in different units. That's effectively what Piri Reis was attempting. Portolan charts were never meant to agree with each other on a global scale. They were local tools. So when historians see distortion, they don't ask, how did Piri Reis get this wrong? They ask, which source is speaking here, and which one is being stretched beyond its limits? The real question is sharper. What information went into the map before distortion, and where did that information come from? Some regions on the map are recognizable. The Caribbean appears in forms that resemble early European understandings of the islands. Parts of the northern coast of South America and the Brazilian coastline show detail consistent with what Iberian sailors were charting in the early 1500s. That's important, because it means we don't need a supernatural explanation. By 1513, Spanish and Portuguese voyages had already generated substantial coastal knowledge. But here's the tension. This recognizable detail sits right beside geography that's inconsistent. Scale shifts, distances wobble, and shapes drift. That pattern is exactly what you'd expect from a compilation. Multiple inputs, multiple standards, stitched together. The map behaves like a collage, and collages always reveal their seams. Along the margins, Piri Reis left notes describing how he built the map. UNESCO's nomination materials emphasize that these marginal notes are central evidence. Piri Reis describes compiling from many earlier charts, often summarized as roughly 20 sources in modern discussions, drawing on Portuguese maps, Arabic maps, Mediterranean charts, and a map attributed to Christopher Columbus. This is the strongest paper trail we have about his inputs, and it creates the central problem. Most of those source maps do not survive or cannot be securely identified today. So historians can't simply compare originals and settle the debate. This is where careful scholarship matters. Cartographic historian Gregory C. McIntosh argues that certain configurations and place name patterns in the Caribbean region are consistent with Columbus-era geographic ideas, including the way some landmasses are conceptualized. But even in McIntosh's strongest version of the argument, there's a hard limit. The Columbus map Piri Reis refers to is lost. So the identification is inferential, based on comparative analysis, not direct proof. At this point, it's tempting to want a definitive answer. Either Piri Reis had access to a Columbus map, or he didn't. But historical investigation doesn't work that way. When a source is missing, historians don't replace it with certainty. They replace it with probability. And probability, by its nature, is uncomfortable. It doesn't resolve the mystery. It outlines the boundaries of what can responsibly be said. The map points to a missing map, and that missing map is the one historians most want to see. Now we reach the section that launched decades of sensational claims. Far south of South America, the map shows a large landmass with jagged coasts and mountains. Some popular writers claimed this was Antarctica, mapped centuries before its documented discovery, sometimes even described as ice-free. Mainstream scholarship rejects that. UNESCO's documentation frames this southern land as resembling the early modern idea of a hypothetical southern continent, often called Terra Australis. McIntosh goes further, explicitly rejecting the Antarctica reading and describing it as pseudo-historical, arguing it depends on the false premise that the map has anomalous global accuracy. And the practical objections are straightforward. Making it Antarctica typically requires heavy rotations and corrections that aren't justified by the map's overall precision. The coastline doesn't match Antarctica in any consistent, testable way. The map isn't globally accurate elsewhere, so there's no baseline for hidden precision. But here's why this section keeps pulling people back in. The reason the southern landmass continues to attract attention isn't because it's accurate, it's because it's ambiguous. Human perception is extremely good at finding patterns, especially when we expect them. When you rotate an image, stretch it, and isolate certain features, resemblance becomes almost inevitable. Historians are cautious of this, because resemblance is not evidence, and coincidence is not confirmation. So if you want a credible conclusion here, it's this. The southern landmass is best treated as conjectural geography, not a secret survey. After nearly a century of modern study, the mystery remains bounded, but real. Here's what scholars still can't fully answer. What the lost source maps actually looked like, especially the Colombian source. How faithfully Piri Reis copied versus interpreted or corrected what he saw. How much distortion comes from Portolan-style compilation versus misunderstanding. What portion of the original world map is missing, and what the full composition was meant to show. UNESCO notes estimates of the original size and surviving proportion are debated. This is the key point for the channel. The uncertainty isn't ancient superscience. It's provenance, method, and missing evidence. The Piri Reis map survives because it was copied, cataloged, and preserved. Its sources did not, and that imbalance matters. History doesn't reward accuracy alone, it rewards survival, which means the story we inherit is always incomplete. The mystery of the Piri Reis map is not locked in the parchment, it's locked in everything that didn't make it through time. So here's the question to leave you with. If Piri Reis really copied from a Columbus-era chart, where is that chart now, and what else was on it? If you want, comment with the single detail you think matters most. The marginal notes, the Caribbean shapes, or the southern landmass. And in the next investigation, we'll follow another artifact that seems to know too much, until you trace what it actually borrowed.